Normally, I continue in whatever series I was preaching on, but it just felt appropriate today to talk about and preach on what kids learned about this past week. Our theme was making waves for Jesus. And our kids made crafts about these. They ran obstacle courses, these object lessons. They got wet outside, as you see. And I'm not really good at making crafts, so we're not going to be doing that today down here. And I tried to run that obstacle course, and it didn't go well. I am holding hope that someone might want to get wet today through a baptism, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But as the theme implies, each story these kids learned had to do with waves and how God used water to make some powerful statements and powerful points. One of the things I've enjoyed most about learning about the world and science is how often it ends up correlating with the spiritual world, right? The Bible often uses metaphors to help us understand difficult concepts, things that work in a spiritual realm that we might have a hard time comprehending, right? Kind of like you might try to explain to our kids how a car works, how complex that is. Like a mechanic has to do for me every time I bring my car in. They have to explain it to me like I'm really, really young. But same idea, we have to explain things, or God uses metaphors to explain his power, his love. And one of the most powerful ones that we see in the Bible is the water. And how God used it over and over and over in the Bible. And just real quick, for water, it's one of the most unique substances in the world. It's interesting that God chose this over and over and over. Water can seep into boulders, right? Massive, massive boulders through these tiny, tiny molecules, tiny, tiny crevices and cracks. And not just cause erosion, but when it freezes, it can just shatter these boulders in half, essentially, just crack them completely in half. It's powerful. Water is a universal solvent. That means it'll dissolve just about anything. Sugar, salt, but also other liquids and even gases. In fact, no other substance dissolves as many things as water does. And furthermore, it's existing in all three states. That means it's a gas. We see that in clouds and steam. It's a liquid, is water, obviously. And it's a solid, too. It can be ice. But it also means that it's able to withstand extreme heat and extreme cold. And in nature, water's not created or destroyed. It's existed. And lastly, water is necessary for life. This is why fried food lasts longer than regular food, because bacteria needs water to survive. Living things need water for survival. Water is powerful, and God used it to accomplish so many of his purposes throughout the whole Bible. But today we'll look at those same three stories that our kiddos learned. Boy, did they learn them. Wednesday, the kids learned how God showed mercy to the Israelites as they crossed the Red Sea, escaping the Egyptians. Thursday, they learned the story about Noah and the ark and how God saved Noah and his family from the floods. And then on Friday, they learned the story of Jesus walking on water and Peter following him. I'm actually going to switch up the order just a little bit. I want to go chronologically. I want to talk about one of the most fascinating stories in the Bible first, and that's Noah and the flood. In fact, Sunday schools everywhere, Bible classes everywhere, teach this. But even non-Bible people, non-Bible church-going Christians have heard this story of the flood. It's one of the most well-known stories in the Bible. However, it's often misunderstood a lot of times. You know, was this an actual worldwide event, more localized? Is this just a mythical story? Answering that question is beyond the scope of the time we have in this sermon, so again, I'll defer you to Tommy for a short 10-month class on that. And I'm going to fill up your calendar real quick, Tom. But I did want to look at the purpose for the flood. Why did God choose to destroy the world with a flood in Noah's day? The story of the flood is told in Genesis chapter 6 through 9, and the passage starts with this kind of strange description between the sons of God and daughters of men seemingly producing Nephilim. Again, I'm going to point you guys to Tommy for a class on Nephilim. But mixed in with this is God's response to the wickedness of the world and his then determination to kind of destroy it all. Following this was God's instruction to Noah to build a large boat and take on it pairs of all the animals. God was going to be sending this massive flood to destroy all terrestrial life not on board the ark. So Noah built the boat, loaded the animals that God brought to him, and as soon as it's done, the rain starts falling. The springs erupt. 40 days of rain. It was a flood for a long time. They were in that boat for a while. Finally, when the water subsided enough, Noah and his family come out, and they offer a sacrifice to God, and God responds by committing to never destroy the world with water again, never to flood the earth. So why did God do this? Why did God do this? So some of these translations, they say the Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. And so in response, God, determined to destroy all life on earth. And it'd be easy to read this and kind of see like, oh, well, this God, he was caught off guard by all this sin, and then he became angry about it. He wiped the whole thing clean. That's what happened. I have a hard time with that because of these two verses. 1 Peter 1:20, he was chosen before the creation of the world, but was revealed in these last times for your sake. This is a God who had chosen Christ as an atoning sacrifice before the foundation. And furthermore, he chose us. For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. So maybe that word, regretted, isn't the best used. Sometimes you see now translated grieved, that he was grieved. And it seems to me like that's a better fit here. This is an emotional response from God the Father, the Creator, over his creation and what they had become. Even though he kind of seemed to maybe know that this might happen, but it's still distressing to him. It was still truly upsetting to him because God's not this impersonal force with no feelings and no emotion. Rather, we see he is intimately involved with his creation. We see him express delight in his creation, but we also see him express disappointment with what we have done, what we do. The parent in me relates to this on a truly deep level. I love my kids. Man, I don't always love the things they do. And so for me, the most obvious answer to the question of why did God flood the world is given twice in the first few verses. The Lord saw how wicked humanity had become, that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. Whoa. And I've heard it said that maybe this is just hyperbole. I don't know about that. I'm not so sure. Either way, it clearly describes a condition of extreme rebellion against God. It doesn't even approach our condition. Sometimes you hear people say, oh, the world's never been worse. And I'm like, oh, you need to read the Bible. You just got to get a few chapters in. This is awful. Well, we have some people who maybe don't follow God or aren't Christians, all those things. They mostly live decent lives. I don't think I would describe some of my neighbors as every inclination of their thoughts was evil all the time. It seems like humanity kind of reached this pinnacle, this point, where if God had not intervened, we might have destroyed ourselves. And so God stepped in and put a stop to the wickedness of those days. So you kind of get in my opinion, two distinct reasons for this flood. The first and most obvious is because of the sinfulness of humanity. A sinfulness that had really just reached, like we said, that peak, that pinnacle. It was a great response to the people. This is a great response to people that today, when you hear them say, man, why does God allow evil to exist in the world? He should just wipe the whole slate clean and get rid of all the evil in the world. If he truly loved us, he would do that. And that's real fun because then you go, oh. He did that. He's done that once. This time we're in is our do-over. Just a thought. But that ties also into the second and maybe more significant reason for the flood is the example that it provides us. God takes the sinfulness of humanity seriously. Even though the flood was a one-time event, it does remind us that our sin separates us from our Creator, and if we don't change it could be a forever thing. But God has been offering us grace for a long, long time, as he offered Noah and his family. When I was growing up, I went to Bible camp, as I've mentioned before. One of my favorite things when I was especially younger was the zip line. Loved the zip line, but was always nervous, really scared. Wait in line, then climb the scaffolding to take the zip line over this big gorge, right? Well, when I put on that harness, it was like, as tight as I could do it. Oh, and I'm like stress testing this thing because, of course, if it was ever going to break, obviously it would happen on the 1 time or 2 times a year that I use it. Well, believe it or not, that harness actually never broke. Didn't even come close to breaking, right? Not even a little bit. So why was I worried? Outside of the obvious answer that my wife would give, that I'm dramatic, the other answer is that it can be sometimes hard to trust when things are scary. When things are scary, I kind of, I feel like it's common for us to forget God's steady hand and faithfulness when life gets scary. It's like I forget all the different times he's brought me through obstacles and see all those obstacles behind me when I'm staring at the next big, crazy zip line. Big, gorgeous, insurmountable thing. When God parted the Red Sea in Exodus 14, the Israelites, they had a lot of big, insurmountable things that God had overcome for them. When we talk about the plagues, whoa. He turned the Nile River, one of the largest rivers in the world, into blood. And then you got the frogs, you got the boil, you got the fire. He turned the lights off on the Egyptians. Just turned out the lights, put them into darkness. Whoa. Then they experienced the Passover. Both a powerful, but also probably an emotional time in general. Just for both sides. They see this power, they experience, they're freed. They're free. And they know how strong and powerful God is, yet they come to the Red Sea, and here's what they say when they see the Egyptian army chasing after them. And they're at the shores of the Red Sea. They say this: was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? Whoa. What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Man, Moses was patient with these people. Didn't we say to you, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. Whoa. They're ready to just go back being slaves. Fine, just rather be slaves. But Moses is so patient with them. He says this: do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring to you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. And the Lord did provide. He parted the water. He made the dry land, and the people walked through. And once they were safely across, where the Egyptians themselves went, cool, we'll do that too. God. And just if you're wondering, well, what's the sign? Are we really saying this happened? Do you know what they're finding in the Red Sea? This is really cool. Chariot wheels, covered in gold, with the right amount of spokes, the right amount of design. You know what else they find in the Red Sea a lot of times? Human bones. And you're like, sure, people die in the ocean. But also horse bones. How often do horses swim in the ocean? You ever seen a horse just swim in the ocean? He destroyed this entire insurmountable army. They think it was 20,000 chariots chasing after him. Can you imagine the sound and the power of that? Like, they have kind of right to be scared, I guess. A little. But boy, God had already done some powerful things. And when the Exodus 14:31, when Israel saw the great power of the Lord used against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord. And they believed him. I feel like our lives are marked with similar Red Sea moments. Times when God has carried us through all these obstacles, but all of a sudden we come to something that we go, how about this one? Now, God, what are we going to do here? I don't know. And each time that we do overcome that, though, when we do have faith, when we do trust in him, our faith is deepened. Our view of God and his goodness and his love and his mercy and grace becomes broadened. There's times when we ought to remember when we're standing on that high up scaffolding, waiting to take that zip line across the gorge. All right, we've done this before. God's gotten us through life like the Israelites with Egypt hot on their trail. We stare at the expanse of our valleys, of our obstacles, doubting how or even if God will bring us through this time. So when we get on those platforms, instead of focusing on these fears in front of us, maybe occasionally we ought to look behind and go, you know what? I think God's got this. Remember, you are the God of great wonders. You demonstrate your awesome power among the nations. And then our last story we're going to look at today involves Jesus and one of my favorite guys in the Bible, my dude, Peter. This guy. The disciples are on a boat, and there's a storm. There's wind, there's big waves, and all of a sudden they see this person walking on the water, and they immediately think it's a ghost. We kind of chuckle at that, but be honest, if you are in that situation, you've never seen someone walk on water. This would be, and you're scared already because you're in a boat, in a storm. Pretty scary. But Jesus says, don't, it's me. Peter, love Peter. He called out to him, Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water. Yes, come, Jesus said. So Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on the water towards Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified, and he began to sink. Save me, Lord, he shouted. Jesus immediately grabbed him, reached out, grabbed him. Oh, you have so little faith, Jesus said. Why did you doubt me? When they climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped. Then the disciples worshiped him. You really are the Son of God, they exclaimed. So it's no secret that Peter's kind of lapse in faith has become the topic of endless sermons over the years. Rightfully so. However, it's worth noting, Peter took his eyes off Jesus, sure. But Peter was the only one who got out of the boat. On the boat, Peter decided, you know what? This boat's rocking in the storm. It's better for me to be walking on water with Jesus in the storm than in the boat. And that took faith. That first step, I don't care what you say, required a bold and powerful faith. Peter kind of has developed, we read the stories, he develops this reputation, well-earned, being a little impulsive, a little stubborn, maybe a little thick-headed. He missed the marks. He did things his own way. He struggled to get what Jesus was saying on more than one occasion. But there's no denying that Jesus was at work in Peter's life, refining his leadership qualities, building his faith. And on the Sea of Galilee, we get a glimpse of Peter's potential being reliant on the power of Jesus. On the Sea of Galilee, Peter did what his peers would not. It doesn't take faith to observe a miracle. It doesn't take any faith to observe a miracle. The Pharisees saw Jesus perform miracles, and even they could not deny Jesus' power and authority. Jesus, however, is not just looking for eyewitnesses. He's looking for followers, people willing to get out of the boat, surrender their will to him. Man, how blessed is Peter. His willingness to step up and step out made sure that not only did he observe the miracle, he got to experience it. What does that mean for us? For a lot of people, Peter's lapse in faith and focus on the waves, it's kind of enough to kind of ridicule him. How could you do that, Peter? How do you not keep your eyes on Jesus? It's true. There's a lot of things we can learn from that. We choose to focus on the dangers and the impossible situations around us rather than focusing on Jesus. These are the moments, like Peter, we too begin to sink. However, before we kind of give Peter a hard time, or Peter, his name means rock, which ironically enough, he was sinking like a rock in the ocean at this point. We should remember that part of the focus of the story is Christ's grace and mercy and love, not Peter's momentary lack of courage or lack of faith. Like Peter, we've all fallen. We've all had moments where we take our eyes off and begin to sink in the ocean. beneath the waves of sin and separation from the Father. The Bible says before Christ, we too were dead because of our disobedience and our many sins. Not drowning, not sinking. Dead. Similar to Peter's peril. It's not us who then reaches out and swims back. No, it's Christ who's right there ready to grab our hands and pull us out. Despite our many failures and moments of weaknesses and lack of faith, it is Christ who pulls us from the waves and redeems us. He was always ready to redeem his friend and follower, Peter. And so the kids had this memory verse. It's a great verse. This is what the Lord says, he who makes a way through the sea and a path through the mighty waters. But you know what's a really cool verse? Just a few verses, same chapter before this. Check this out. Do not be afraid, for I have ransomed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you go through deep waters, I will be with you. When you go through rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. And Jesus also talks very specifically about some waters that he gives. This is where this metaphor about water kind of comes in right here. John 4:10, we see this story of Jesus coming to the woman at the well. And he asks her, can I have a drink? And she's kind of like, who are you? Kind of basically who are you? I don't know. I'm not associating with you. Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. Well, what's her response? Sir, you have nothing to draw with and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Jesus is like, great question. I'm glad you asked it. Everyone who drinks this water, the well water, will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life. You want to know what's cool about that living water? It behaves just like water. Just like we see in science. We said that water is able to get into the tiniest places and through its structure and power break apart giant boulders. Living water can reach the deepest, darkest places of our souls and expose and cleanse us. There is literally no sin that our Lord cannot find, no hidden place that he cannot touch and renew. That living water seeps into us and is powerful enough to break the chains of sin and death, just like water breaking a boulder. We said that water is the universal solvent. Dissolves just about anything. Living water can dissolve and wash away any type of sin, any thought, any action, any eternal emotion. It's universal in its ability to cleanse if we would ask for it. It exists in three natures. It continually exists. It cannot be destroyed. Living water does not expire, doesn't go away. It endures, it lasts. Jesus can meet us at any point in our lives, at any moment. He's ever present with us. We just have to have that faith. And water, this is the easy one. You need it. It's necessary for life. Living water is necessary for a fulfilled life. For your spiritual life, feeling dried up? Well, we need to realize that our spiritual life needs living water to survive. Just like our physical body needs water to survive. How do we get this water? How do we get the water? We come to him every day to get that living water. We get in his word every day to get that water. We talk to him every day to get that water. The water begins with water. The Bible begins with water at the very beginning. Water always has been, always will be. We have to have it. It nurtures, it revives, it destroys, it inspires joy. You should have seen those kids playing out in that water this week. Oh man, they love that. It builds community, it connects us. It's no surprise then that water sits at the center of baptism. Baptism is going public with your faith. Your commitment to Jesus is personal. It is. But it's not meant to be private. Baptism is our declaration to the world how Jesus has changed our life. God saved you by his grace when you believed, and you can't take credit for it. It is a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done, so none of us can boast about it. Baptism is commanded, but it's also an opportunity to shout to the world and give a testimony of the one who pulled you out of that water. If you're hearing this today and you're ready to get in that water, to that living water, man, there's nothing more that we would rather do here today than that, to get in that water. If you have any needs at all, let this family here at Canyon know. Why don't you come as we stand and sing?